Backbiting Gheebat in society with Qurn's warning. What if I told you that you may have eaten the flesh of your own brother this week and you didn't even realize it? Shocking, right? But those aren't my words. That's how the Qur'an describes backbiting Gheebat. It says, would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You would hate it. Pause for a second. Imagine that scene. It's disgusting, horrifying. You would never do it. Yet the Qur'an tells us, when we backbite, when we talk behind someone's back, when we enjoy the flaws of others, we are doing exactly that. But here's the real twist. Most of us don't even notice when we slip into it. It starts small. A casual laugh about a colleague. Did you hear what she did? Whispered in a corner. A family gathering where someone's mistake becomes entertainment. And before we know it, gossip is normal. Backbiting is culture. And the Qur'an's warning becomes background noise. Let's open the first door together. Why do we do it? Because it feels good. It gives us power. Talking about someone else's weakness makes us feel a little stronger, a little taller. But that's an illusion. Because while you think you're rising, you're actually sinking. Sinking in the eyes of Allah. Second door. What does it cost us? Backbiting destroys trust. It poisons families. It breaks friendships. Have you ever noticed how quickly respect disappears when people realize you talk about others? If they hear you gossip about someone today, they know you'll gossip about them tomorrow, and trust is gone. Third door, the Qur'an doesn't just discourage it. It gives the most disturbing picture to stop us in our tracks, because words cut deeper than knives. And in the sight of Allah, dishonoring your brother or sister with your tongue is worse than eating flesh. So what's the way out? It's simple, but not easy. Next time your tongue itches to speak, pause. Ask yourself, would I say this if they were standing right here? If the answer is no, don't say it. And if someone starts gossiping near you, change the subject. That silence is not weakness. That silence is strength. And here's the secret no one tells you. When you protect the honor of your brother or sister in their absence, Allah promises to protect your honor in front of others. That's not just a warning, that's a deal from the Creator Himself. So the next time your heart wants to join in the whispers, remember the image of flesh, and remember that the strongest people in society aren't the loudest gossips. They are the ones who know when to stay silent. Brothers and sisters, this isn't just about avoiding sin. It's about creating a community where people feel safe, respected, and loved, where we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. And you, sitting here, listening right now, you are part of that mission. You're not ordinary. You're someone who has heard the warning, felt the weight, and can choose differently. So let's walk out today not just as listeners, but as guardians of each other's honor. Because a society without backbiting is not just cleaner, it's stronger, purer, closer to Allah. And remember, the VIPs in the eyes of Allah are not the ones who know the most secrets about others. They are the ones who protect the secrets of others. Be one of them. Thank you. Backbiting is described in the Qur'an as eating the flesh of your dead brother, a horrifying image meant to stop us. It often slips into daily life casually, making it a dangerous, silent habit. We backbite because it feels empowering, but in reality, it lowers our status with Allah and others. Backbiting destroys trust, poisons relationships, and damages communities. The Qur'an warns us strongly because words can wound more deeply than weapons. Protecting others' honor earns Allah's protection over our own. True strength lies in restraint. Imagine for a moment you are sitting at a dinner table. The food is laid out beautifully, the aroma fills the room, and everyone is ready to eat. But instead of plates of rice, meat, or bread, what if you saw something terrifying on the table? A plate with the flesh of a human being, someone you know, someone you love. Your brother, your sister, your friend. Would you ever lift your fork? Would you ever allow your lips to touch it? Just the thought alone sends shivers down your spine. Your stomach twists. Your heart resists even the imagination of it. And yet, the Qur'an tells us, every time we indulge in backbiting, every time we talk about someone behind their back, this is what we are doing. Not in the literal sense, but in a sense far more powerful, far more spiritual, and far more disgusting in the eyes of Allah. Allah says in Surah Al-Hujurat, do not backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You would hate it. This isn't a random metaphor. It's a vivid image meant to shock us awake. Allah could have simply said, do not talk about people behind their back. But He didn't. He chose the most revolting, the most disturbing image to shake our hearts. Why? Because words alone wouldn't stop us. We already know gossip is wrong. But knowing is not the same as feeling. So Allah paints a picture so terrifying that once you really see it, you cannot unsee it. The moment your tongue wants to slip, that image flashes before your eyes. A lifeless body, your brother's flesh, and your own hand raised to consume it. And this is not just theory. Let's make it real. Picture a family gathering. Laughter fills the room. Someone brings up a cousin who isn't there, saying, did you hear what he did? He failed his exams again. Everyone chuckles. Another adds, he's always been lazy, just like his father. More laughter. It feels harmless, almost entertaining. But what if, instead of words, those laughs were bites? What if every chuckle tore into his skin? What if every insult cut into his body? Suddenly the scene isn't funny anymore. It's horrifying. That is exactly why Allah used this imagery, to make us realize that the unseen reality of our words is far uglier than we think. And it doesn't stop with families. Imagine a workplace. A group of colleagues sit around during lunch, venting about a team member. She's so slow with her work. He always takes credit. She dresses so poorly. On the surface, it feels like bonding, a way to connect. But underneath, what's happening? They're feeding on someone's absence. They're tearing into a reputation that isn't there to defend itself. And if you zoom out, what you see is not people sharing sandwiches, but people sitting around a table of human flesh, eating bites of a person who doesn't even know what's happening. The Qur'an isn't exaggerating. It's unveiling a hidden reality. Even the Prophet Muhammad warned us with the same seriousness. He once asked his companions, do you know what backbiting is? They replied, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, it is to mention something about your brother that he would dislike. Someone then asked, but what if what I say is true? And the Prophet replied, if what you say about him is true, that is backbiting. If it is not true, that is slander. Think about that. Even if it's true, even if you're just being honest, it is still backbiting if the person wouldn't want it said. Truth does not make it lighter. In fact, truth makes it even more dangerous because it gives you a false sense of justification. And that's what makes this so scary. Most of us don't gossip with malicious intent. We don't wake up thinking, today I'll eat someone's flesh. It slips into our lives in ways that feel harmless. I'm just concerned about her. We're only joking. It's just between us. But these small excuses don't change the reality. The Qur'an doesn't say, only malicious gossip is eating flesh. It says backbiting, period. The act of talking behind someone's back, true or false, is an act that Allah Himself compared to the most disgusting image possible. So the question we must ask ourselves is this: why would Allah use such heavy words for something we take so lightly? It's because He knows how destructive it is. Eating flesh doesn't just disgust you. It dehumanizes the victim. It reduces a human being to a piece of meat. And that is exactly what backbiting does. It strips away someone's dignity, their reputation, their honor, and turns it into a snack for others. Once you see it this way, once you really feel it in your heart, you can never look at gossip the same again. Next time the urge rises to join in, that image will come back. Your brother's lifeless body, your sister's flesh on your tongue, your friend's honor on your plate. And you will ask yourself, am I really that hungry? Picture a house built with love, brick by brick, room by room. Inside there is laughter, warmth, and a sense of safety. Now imagine a small crack forming in the wall. At first, it looks harmless, barely noticeable. But with time, the crack grows, rain seeps in, the foundation weakens, and slowly, without anyone realizing, the house begins to collapse. This is what backbiting does to our relationships. It starts small, a comment here, a laugh there, nothing dramatic. But little by little, it eats away at the trust that holds families, friendships, and communities together until suddenly, everything feels broken. Trust is fragile. It takes years to build, but only seconds to destroy. And backbiting is one of the fastest ways to shatter it. Think about a friend you truly trusted, someone you thought would never betray you. Then one day you overhear them speaking about you, laughing at your expense, sharing something you told them in confidence. That sting in your chest, that sudden shift where closeness turns into distance, it doesn't fade quickly. In fact, once trust is broken, it rarely returns to what it was. And this is why backbiting costs us so much, because it makes people question not just your words in that moment, but your entire character. The Prophet Muhammad warned us about this very danger. He said, the worst form of usury is attacking the honor of a Muslim without right. Imagine that. Worse than financial theft, worse than cheating someone's money, is stealing someone's dignity with your tongue. Because money can be earned again. But honor, once it's damaged, is far harder to rebuild. When we backbite, we are not just making a passing comment. We are withdrawing from the bank of trust and often leaving it empty. Consider a workplace setting. A group of employees sit together and one of them casually says, honestly, he's so disorganized, he can't manage anything properly. Everyone laughs, nods, adds their own stories. The person being spoken about isn't there to defend himself. But here's what happens. Every person at that table silently makes a note. If he talks about him like this, he'll talk about me too. The laughter covers it in the moment, but the trust has already cracked. And the one who spoke, instead of seeming clever or bold, actually shrinks in their eyes. Because if there's one universal truth, it's this: no one respects a backbiter. And this doesn't only happen among strangers. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. Imagine a family where siblings share everything. Then, one day, one sibling learns that the other has been mocking them in front of relatives, sharing embarrassing details of their life. That bond, once unshakable, now feels uncertain. And uncertainty is the death of intimacy. Families fall apart not because of giant betrayals, but because of the tiny daggers of gossip that accumulate until the heart is too scarred to feel safe anymore. The Qur'an warns us with such intensity because Allah knows the ripple effect. One word of backbiting can travel farther than you ever intended. What starts as a whisper in one room can turn into a wildfire in another. And by the time it reaches the person you spoke about, it may be unrecognizable, twisted, exaggerated, yet still carrying your fingerprints. And then, a friendship ends, a marriage cracks, a community splits, all because of words that could have been swallowed. Even worse, backbiting doesn't just destroy the trust of the one you talked about. It destroys the trust of those who listened. People learn quickly. If you backbite once, they assume you'll do it again. They smile with you, but deep down, they pull back. They measure their words around you. They stop confiding in you. And eventually, you find yourself isolated, wondering why people don't open up anymore. The truth is simple. They don't trust you with their name when they're not in the room. And perhaps the heaviest cost of all is the unseen one. The Prophet said, on the day of judgment, a man will come with mountains of good deeds, but he will find that they have been taken away and given to those he wronged with his tongue. Imagine that. You prayed, you fasted, you gave charity, you did good, yet on that day, the people you mocked, the ones you ridiculed, the ones you spoke about behind their backs, will come and take from your good deeds as payment. And when your good deeds run out, their sins will be thrown onto you. What greater loss is there than to spend a lifetime collecting treasures only to hand them away because of words you didn't hold back? So the cost of backbiting is not just a broken relationship here or there. It is a chain reaction. It is the collapse of trust in families, the erosion of respect in communities, the loss of blessings in the hereafter. And once you realize the weight of that cost, you begin to see how expensive every careless word really is. There are times when gentle reminders are enough, and there are times when only a shocking image can pierce through our hearts. The Qur'an, in its infinite wisdom, does not shy away from using language that shakes us to our core. When Allah describes backbiting, He does not simply say, "Do not speak ill of others." Instead, He paints a picture so gruesome, so revolting, that the listener cannot ignore it. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You would hate it. These words are not just a command, they are a mirror held up to our actions. And once you see what is reflected, you cannot look away. Why flesh? Why a dead brother? Because Allah knows the human heart. Imagine it, your brother lies lifeless before you. His body is cold, still, silent. You loved him in life, and in death, you cannot even bear to see him harm. The thought of tearing into his flesh is enough to make you gag. It is an image that strikes deep into our natural sense of disgust and loyalty. And Allah says, this is exactly what you are doing when you speak behind someone's back. You are consuming their honor, their dignity, their reputation, as if it were flesh torn from their body. And not just anyone's flesh, the flesh of your brother, your own family, your own people. Because in Islam, the bond of faith makes us brothers and sisters. Imagine this scene in a modern context. A group of friends sit together at a cafe. They laugh, sip their drinks, and then the conversation turns. One says, "Did you see how badly he messed up his presentation?" Another chuckles, "He always embarrasses himself." They all laugh, feeling closer through this shared mockery. But pause for a moment. If we could lift the veil between the seen and unseen, what would we witness? Not smiles and laughter, but a group of people chewing on the flesh of their absent friend, their lips stained, their teeth tearing, their laughter echoing in a room filled with the stench of blood. This is the hidden reality the Qur'an reveals. And notice how Allah adds, you would hate it. This isn't just a warning. It is an appeal to our own sense of decency. Allah reminds us deep down, you already despise this act. Your nature recoils at the thought of eating flesh. So why don't you recoil when you do the spiritual equivalent with your tongue? It is as though Allah is saying, you do not need to be convinced. Your heart already knows it is vile. All you need is to see it clearly. The Prophet Muhammad reinforced this with his words and actions. Once, he overheard Aisha speak ill of another woman, saying she was short. The Prophet immediately stopped her and said, "You have said a word which, if mixed with the water of the sea, would contaminate it. Think of that. One small remark, one seemingly harmless comment enough to pollute the entire ocean. Why? Because backbiting is not measured by the size of the word, but by the weight it carries in the sight of Allah. And here lies the genius of the Qurn's disturbing imagery. If Allah had simply said, do not gossip, perhaps we would nod and move on. But by describing it as eating flesh, He ties the act to something unforgettable. The next time you hear gossip, your mind flashes to that revolting image. The next time your own tongue itches to slip, you remember the stench, the horror, the shame of such a deed. It is an image designed not just to be understood, but to haunt you, to live in your conscience, to stop you in your tracks. Consider how other sins are described in the Qur'an. Drinking wine is described as filth, gambling as abomination, arrogance as a crime. But backbiting? It is compared to cannibalism. Not just cannibalism, but cannibalism of your dead brother. What could be more repulsive than that? It shows us that in Allah's scale, the dishonoring of another Muslim is not a small matter. It is not something to brush aside as just words. It is an act that corrodes the very soul of society. An act so ugly that only the ugliest image could capture its reality. And yet, despite this terrifying warning, many of us continue as if it were nothing. Why? Because we are desensitized. In our homes, gossip fills the dinner table. In our offices, it laces our casual conversations. In our social media feeds, it dominates the comment sections. We live in a culture where tearing others apart is normal. But the Qur'an refuses to let us normalize it. By invoking the imagery of flesh, Allah calls us to feel disgust, not just at cannibalism, but at gossip itself, until our hearts are trained to hate it just as naturally as we hate the thought of eating flesh. So the next time you sit in a circle where someone begins to mock another, don't imagine words. Imagine a corpse being placed in the center. Imagine people reaching in, ripping pieces, chewing them with laughter. And then ask yourself, will I join? Will I take a bite? Or will I step back and refuse to be part of something my own soul already despises? This is the power of the Qur'an's imagery. It transforms something invisible into something unforgettable. And once you truly see it, you cannot unsee it. Trust is like glass. You hold it in your hands carefully, you admire its clarity, but the moment it slips and shatters, no matter how much you try to piece it back together, the cracks remain visible. This is what backbiting does. It smashes the fragile glass of trust, leaving behind shards that cut both the one who is spoken about and the one who speaks. And once trust is broken, it is almost impossible to restore to its original form. Think about your own life. Have you ever shared something deeply personal with someone? Something you expected would remain safe between the two of you, only to discover later that it had been repeated in your absence. The disappointment is sharp, almost physical. You replay the moment you confided, you question your judgment, and you tell yourself quietly, never again. From that point forward, you may smile with that person, you may talk casually, but the invisible barrier has already been built. You cannot look at them the same way again. This is the unseen wound of backbiting. Families suffer this more than anyone realizes. Picture a dinner table where a mother, in her frustration, begins criticizing one child to another. Why can't your brother be more responsible? He's always careless. The child listening nods, but deep down, something else happens. He begins to wonder, if she talks about him like this, what does she say about me when I'm not here? Without meaning to, the parent plants a seed of doubt in her child's heart. That seed grows into mistrust, and slowly the home, which should be a sanctuary, becomes a place of suspicion. Friendships collapse under the same weight. Two friends may share years of memories, inside jokes, secrets whispered late at night. But one moment of backbiting can erase it all. Imagine one friend hearing from another source. She said, "You're selfish, that you only care about yourself." Even if the words are exaggerated, even if they were said in a moment of frustration, the damage is done. The question takes root. If she feels this way, has she always felt it? Has she been smiling in my face while holding these thoughts inside? Trust doesn't just weaken, it evaporates. The workplace is another battlefield of trust. A manager praises an employee publicly, but criticizes them harshly in private conversations with others. When the employee inevitably finds out, what happens? Respect dissolves, motivation fades, and soon productivity suffers because the bond between leader and team has been poisoned. Backbiting in a workplace doesn't just harm reputations, it creates an atmosphere of fear where people feel they must protect themselves instead of collaborate. The Qur'an's warning is not only spiritual, it is social. It teaches us that a community where tongues are unchecked cannot thrive. The Prophet Muhammad emphasized this when he said, "A Muslim is the one from whose tongue and hand other Muslims are safe." Notice the order, tongue first, hand second, because wounds of the tongue can spread faster than wounds of the hand. Physical wounds heal with time, But the scar left by betrayal of trust often lingers for a lifetime. One sharp remark, one careless comment, and suddenly you are marked in people's minds not as trustworthy, but as dangerous. And here lies the paradox. Often people backbite to feel closer to others. They share gossip thinking it builds connection. If I tell you this secret about her, it means I trust you. But in reality, the listener does not think how close we are. They think, if she tells me about her, she will tell her about me. What was intended as intimacy becomes exposure. What was meant to bond becomes the very reason for distance. Backbiting gives the illusion of closeness, while ensuring true closeness can never exist. Even children instinctively sense this. A child hears two adults mocking someone in private. The child laughs along but inside feels uneasy. They think, if adults can speak about others this way, what about me? The child learns not trust but fear. And that fear shapes how they grow, how they confide, how they build relationships later in life. The cycle continues, and trust becomes an endangered quality in the entire community. And perhaps the most dangerous part is how quickly respect evaporates. Once someone is labeled a backbiter, no one feels truly safe around them. People may still interact, but it is surface level, cautious, polite. Behind the smiles is a quiet withdrawal. Relationships that could have blossomed into deep, meaningful bonds wither into transactional exchanges. The society begins to resemble a marketplace where everyone is on guard, watching their words, protecting their image, rather than a family bound by love and sincerity. The Qur'an warns us so vividly because Allah knows what we often fail to see, that communities are built not on shared spaces, but on shared trust. A society where backbiting spreads is like a building eaten from within by termites. From the outside, it may look strong, but touch it and it crumbles. Every word of gossip is another bite, another termite in the foundation, until suddenly everything collapses. And when that happens, people wonder why families are fractured, why friendships are short-lived, why communities are divided. The answer, more often than not, is that trust was silently destroyed by tongues left unchecked. A knife leaves a scar you can see. It pierces the skin, it draws blood, and though it may hurt for days or weeks, eventually the wound heals. But words can cut in places no doctor can reach, in ways no medicine can soothe. A single sentence can pierce the heart, slash through confidence, and bleed a soul dry of hope. And unlike a knife wound, the scars of words are invisible, carried silently for years, hidden behind smiles and laughter that mask the pain. This is why Allah and His Messenger warned us with such seriousness about the tongue. Because while a hand may strike once, a tongue can strike endlessly, cutting deeper each time, leaving wounds that never fully heal. Imagine a child in school, nervous about a presentation. He stumbles over his words, his classmates laugh, and one whispers, "You're so stupid." That one comment, sharp and casual, might echo in his head for decades. Long after the laughter fades, long after the classmates forget, he remembers. The words replay every time he stands to speak, every time he doubts himself, every time he feels small. No knife could leave a wound that deep. That is the power of words. And backbiting, though spoken in someone's absence, has the same sharpness. It carves at their reputation, it slices through their dignity, it cuts them in places they cannot defend. It is like stabbing someone while they sleep, an attack when they are most vulnerable, unable to protect themselves. The Prophet Muhammad said, "A servant may speak a word without giving it any thought, and because of it, he will fall into the depths of hell." That is how heavy words can be. A moment of carelessness for us can be a lifetime of burden for someone else. Think about this in your own life. Perhaps you have heard something said about you behind your back. A friend told you, they said you're unreliable. Or she said you're fake. The sting of betrayal burns, but even more painful is the realization that this is how others see you now. It shapes the way people treat you, whether they trust you, whether they invite you, whether they respect you. One word, one careless sentence can shift an entire perception. That is how destructive backbiting is. It doesn't just wound feelings, it rewrites reputations. And sometimes the wound of words is worse because it never seems to fade. There are adults walking today with the weight of words spoken to them as children. You'll never be good enough. You're such a disappointment. No one likes you. These words become chains, dragging behind them, holding them back from ever rising with confidence. If you ask them what their parents or teachers said that encouraged them, they may struggle to remember. But if you ask them what words broke them, they can recite them word for word years later, with the same sting as if it was said yesterday. That is the cruelty of the tongue. Now imagine multiplying that cruelty by a community. A person makes a mistake, and instead of being corrected gently, their error becomes entertainment. Stories spread from one tongue to another. He failed. She divorced. He lost his job. She can't control her kids. Before long, the person becomes defined not by who they are, but by the labels society has carved into them with its words. And what happens? They retreat. They stop showing up. They stop believing in themselves. They feel worthless not because of their sin or failure, but because of the knives that kept cutting long after the event had passed. This is why the Qur'an describes words as flesh being consumed, because the tongue does not simply describe, it devours. Even silence in the face of gossip is a wound. Imagine sitting in a room where people laugh about you and no one defends you. No one says, "Stop." That's not fair. The absence of protection cuts just as deep as the words themselves. It tells the victim, you are alone. And loneliness, the feeling of being unprotected, is one of the heaviest wounds of all. But here is the most frightening truth. While knives can only cut the body, words can cut the soul, and Allah judges the soul. A bruise on the arm may vanish in days, but a bruise on the heart is recorded, remembered, and will be answered for on the day of judgment. The Prophet I said, "Do you know who the bankrupt person is?" His companions replied, "The one without money or goods." The Prophet I said, "The bankrupt person from my nation is the one who comes on the day of judgment with prayers, fasting, and charity, but he insulted this one, slandered that one, consumed the wealth of another, shed the blood of another, and beat another. So his good deeds will be taken from him and given to them. And if his good deeds run out, their sins will be loaded upon him, until he is thrown into the fire." Look at that. Insults and slander listed among the greatest reasons for losing everything on that day. Because words, though they seem light on the tongue, are heavy on the scales. So when you think of knives, remember that words are sharper. When you think of wounds, remember that gossip can cut deeper. And when you are tempted to join in the easy laughter of backbiting, picture yourself holding not a harmless word, but a blade, and ask yourself, would I stab someone I love? Would I pierce their heart knowingly? If the answer is no, then neither should you let your tongue loose. For Allah has told us, and life has shown us, that words can be weapons more dangerous than any steel ever forged. There is a secret many people overlook, a divine trade hidden in the folds of our everyday choices. The secret is this: when you protect someone else's honor, Allah Himself promises to protect yours. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but if you pause and let it sink in, it is one of the most powerful guarantees you will ever receive. Because every single one of us is vulnerable to being spoken about. Every one of us has flaws, weaknesses, and moments we would not want broadcasted. And the same way we feel the sting of gossip, Allah knows we long for someone to defend us when we are absent. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Whoever defends the honor of his brother, Allah will protect his face from the fire on the day of resurrection." Imagine that. Just one act of courage, one moment of saying, "Stop, that's not fair," and Allah writes for you a shield on the day when every face will be exposed. The day when no one can hide behind excuses, when every deed is displayed, and when the fire is near enough to be seen and felt. On that terrifying day, Allah promises His protection to those who protected others in this life. Picture a gathering where someone begins mocking a person who is not present. The group laughs, the energy builds, and all eyes turn to you, waiting for your contribution. In that moment, silence is the easy path. A smile, a chuckle, and you blend in. But silence also makes you complicit. The harder path, the path of courage, is to interrupt. To say, let's not talk about them like that. They're not here to defend themselves. That single sentence changes everything. The laughter falters. The momentum dies. The backbiter feels exposed. And the absent person, though they may never know what you did, gains a defender they never expected. And Allah sees, Allah records, Allah promises, as you stood up for your brother or sister in their absence, He will stand for you in yours. And it doesn't only apply to the hereafter. Even in this world, you see the fruits of it. People respect those who refuse to engage in gossip. They may grumble at first, but deep down, they feel safe around such a person. They think if she defended them when they weren't here, she will defend me too. That trust is priceless. It builds bonds stronger than years of empty talk. It turns acquaintances into loyal friends and communities into safe havens. The one who refuses to feed on flesh becomes the one everyone wants to sit beside, because safety surrounds them. Think of it this way: when you walk into a room, do people feel more anxious or more at peace? If you are known for backbiting, your presence makes hearts guarded. People measure their words, fearful that what they say will later be twisted and repeated. But if you are known as someone who protects honor, your presence relaxes hearts. People open up, knowing their words will be safe with you. That is a gift. That is Allah's barakah poured into your relationships, all because you restrained your tongue and used it as a shield instead of a sword. There are countless real-life examples of this. A young man once told a story of how his reputation was saved by someone he barely knew. In his absence, people were ridiculing him, mocking his mistakes. A man stood up and said, "Enough. He is not here. If you have a problem with him, speak to him directly. Otherwise, fear Allah." The gossip ended. Months later, when the young man discovered what happened, his respect and gratitude for that defender grew so strong that they became lifelong friends. One small act of defense created a bond of loyalty that would never have existed otherwise. This is how Allah plants love in hearts when you protect the honor of others. And the opposite is just as true. When you fail to defend someone, you unknowingly sign away your own safety. Because what you let pass in silence will eventually return to you. The same way you watch someone else's dignity crumble, others will one day watch yours. Unless, in those critical moments, you choose to be different. Unless you choose to be the one who breaks the chain, who refuses to let flesh be eaten in your presence. The truth is, every one of us will one day face a moment of absence. We will all have a room where our name is mentioned, where our story is twisted, where our flaws are laughed at. And when that moment comes, who will defend us? Who will say, "Stop, that's my brother, that's my sister"? That is why Allah's promise is so beautiful. It is not only about your courage, it is about divine justice. Allah guarantees that if you defend others, He will send defenders for you. And if no one speaks for you in this world, then He Himself will speak for you in the hereafter. So the next time gossip starts and silence feels easy, remember the trade being offered. A small discomfort now, in exchange for Allah's protection then. A brief stand here for eternal safety there. Your tongue becomes not just a muscle of words, but a shield that earns you the smile of your Lord. And that, more than anything, is worth far more than joining in on a laugh at someone else's expense.